Good evening and welcome to The Breakdown. I am Tara Setmayer. This is the Rick Wilson, and we are brought to you by the Lincoln Project. First, I want to start the show off tonight because, Rick, we've had two awful mass shootings in this country in the last week.
Yeah.
And just my heart breaks and goes out to the communities in Atlanta from what happened last week, and then from this awful shooting yesterday in Boulder, Colorado, at a supermarket, 10 people dead, including a police officer.
Sure.
This is just such a difficult topic. And I don't know what all the answers are to it, but I just know that I don't know how much more this country is going to put up with this issue. And, as a gun owning household and, a law enforcement household, there's a lot of facets to the gun reform debate that, I think have been overlooked because of politics over the years. And, after Sandy Hook, it was a little difficult. You figure, if little kids getting killed isn't enough to move things, I don't know what is. But I don't know, Rick. I just think that this country has a lot of soul searching to do on how to approach this issue. And I just want to say that, my heart breaks and I pray for the families of those communities that have suffered another tragedy.
Yeah, I think there's a bifurcation of this problem that the depth of these tragedies, it keeps coming back to the fact that you can have the strictest gun laws in the world and people who are mentally ill are going to do terrible goddamn things. We need to work on the mental health problem of access to firearms by people with mental health problems on the front end, which as a gun owner and as a guy who likes to shoot, I own more guns than most people do. And I enjoy that, but I am a safe and lawful gun owner. And there's a problem here with these folks who have clear diagnosed mental illnesses who are still getting access to firearms. And we got to talk about it. We got to deal with it because if you want to protect and preserve the Second Amendment right that Americans do treasure and Americans do, you've got to work this mental health problem on the front end of this. That is an area where we really need to do some work as a country, and we don't want to do it. We don't want to say, hey, so-and-so has been institutionalized. So-and-so has been a danger to himself or others. We need to make sure that we have a better alerting system in the states and at the federal level and work that problem because it is something that, and I think it would actually address an awful lot of the concerns about gun control on the left because the people who do these things by definition are mentally ill and by definition have significant cognitive impairment about their judgment, because there are 30 million AR-15s in this country, and 29
you're never going to get rid of them all.
999 aren't used. Oh no, yeah, they're here to stay. It is the most popular firearm. The Glock 17 and the AR-15 are the most popular firearms in the world. It's short of the AK-47. That's another story for another day. But
different part of the world.
We need to do a much better job in this country on mental health matters holistically, not just about gun control. There's a lot of stuff in there about suicide prevention and about spousal abuse and about child abuse that all come down to a mental health crisis in this country that we don't want to talk about and we don't want to address as a country. So we do have to talk about that. It's important going forward.
It's true. It's another one of those multifaceted issues that are complex that we have to start somewhere. Even after Parkland, the discussion about red flag laws and mistakes in the reporting and who knew what and when, and 39 calls to the police, but nothing could be done. Like things like that could be tightened up. That would help prevent some of these things more so than just banning certain types of weapons. I know that is a knee-jerk reaction, and people say, well, why do they need AR-15s? And I mean, I think that, that discussion is not going to move the needle because it hasn't in many years. So, I just hope that there are more substantive discussions about this, and addressing the mental health side of it as well. And the reporting, everything you just said, has to be included if we're going to make a difference, because you're never going to be able to legislate evil. So we pray for them, though. It's just heartbreaking. But switching gears, we have a guest tonight. We're going to talk about disinformation because this is really, really important. This is something that at the Lincoln Project, we are continuing to focus on because a lot of the things that are happening in our politics, what we're seeing going on in this country is intertwined with the amount of disinformation that is being put out there and how many people are subject to it. It's sometimes you don't even realize it, that they've become very sophisticated in their methods of delivering it. So our guest tonight, Dave Troy, is an expert in this area. So we're going to talk to him about that and also about how disinformation played a role in the insurrection on January 6th. You'd be surprised at how they're all intertwined. It's a very tangled web. We always want to hear from you. So of course, please tweet us at #AskTheBreakdown. If you have a question for us or for our guest, be sure to say so in your tweet. And we're still keeping it old school. You can leave us a voicemail. There's the number, 701-203-1208. Even if we don't get to your voicemail tonight, please know that someone does listen to them. We hear them. And oftentimes we do compilations and we put them out on social media. So please leave us a message. Even if we don't get to it tonight, we still hear them and we play them. So Rick, speaking of interesting things, old school.
Evil.
We had an old school, evil old school. We had an old school spat over the weekend with a little state senator down there in Georgia. His name was Senator Albers, John Albers. Why don't you tell us about what happened, Rick? I'm going to let you tell this story.
Over the weekend, we started looking at Georgia as one of the states that is going to try to pass some of the most restrictive and racially charged anti-voting laws in the country. Because they're not voting laws, folks. They're anti-voting laws. They seek to prevent people from exercising the franchise, particularly in a lot of these states, African Americans. Now, in Georgia, we identified a bunch of people who are pretty bad actors in this. One guy named John Albers, he's a state senator from, I believe, Kennesaw County, north of Atlanta. Well, John Albers worked for a big law firm. And we pointed out to his big law firm in a couple of tweets that he was one of the guys who was involved in this very broad set of votes and sponsorships of legislation that was going to make it much more difficult for Georgians to vote and much more difficult for African American Georgians to vote. Well, they let John Albers go. And the technical term of art we use in science is that he squealed like a bitch. John Albers yesterday gave a tearful speech on the floor of the Georgia Senate, blaming the Lincoln Project, saying we were committing economic terrorism. Well, two things I wanted to address tonight. First off, we had deleted one of the tweets, or a couple of the tweets, not because we didn't stand by what they said, but because the bills we cited didn't go far enough in describing what John Albers had done. They didn't go far enough in describing the depth of the depravity of the bills that are in the Georgia legislature right now that are moving forward and I know we get a little criticism for calling it the new Jim Crow, but they absolutely are designed to restrict and inhibit African American voting in Georgia. And so John Albers got fired from his job. Apparently, his law firm wasn't as excited about John Albers being one of the many sponsors and supporters of a set of racially discriminatory anti-voting laws and voting restrictions as the rest of the Republican caucus was. And they acted shocked that he was involved in this. But, there's gambling in Casablanca, and John Albers is part of a large movement in the state of Georgia with the Republican Party seeking to disenfranchise African Americans. And as I said that night, you bought the ticket and you took the ride. So John Albers has become now a darling of Fox and a darling of the alt-right and the far right. Suddenly he's a hero because we're trying to cancel him. This organization has spent the last 3 months with people aggressively trying to cancel us in every possible way. And we get up every day. You know what we do? We don't bitch about being canceled. We get up every day. We go kick the shit out of bad guys. That's our job. Go kick the shit out of bad guys. It's our mission every day. I say this to the team in the mornings. Let's go kill bad guys. Let's go take out bad guys. And John Albers I'm sorry. You may think that you're some sort of moderate from North Georgia and you're trying to keep your moderate sort of swing seat in hand. And you got a couple of free passes from the leadership in the Senate to not vote on the stinkiest of the bills. But guess what? You are part of the problem. It's not only that you stood up for those things, but you didn't speak out for freedom. You didn't speak out for democracy. You didn't speak out for the right of people to vote. The right to vote was the most hard-won and painful vote or painful right our society has ever dealt with. When we started out in this country, the fundamental flaw of slavery prevented a truly small d democratic society. Okay? Our republic was flawed. We fought a civil war. We fought a civil rights movement. It has been a slow, horribly slow bending of the arc in the right direction. And guys like John Albers are part of trying to bend it back, trying to move back to the past, trying to move back to the Jim Crow era. And let's not put too fine a point on it. The Jim Crow era, those laws were designed to inhibit and cause friction for African American voters. This is exactly what is happening here. They're not going to, they shouldn't bullshit you. It's not about election security. It's not about voter integrity. These are all part of a big lie. They are trying to disenfranchise African American voters. And why? Because in Georgia, they got their ass kicked in the presidential election. And the world is changing underneath them. And they're so goddamn scared of it, they can't see straight. So listen, John Albers, though,
exactly
I want
right.
to say this, John. I've talked to a couple people in Georgia today that I've known for a long time. I've done some politics in Georgia over the years. And basically they described you as a whinging and sort of not very truthful guy, which, I don't know you personally, but I can see from your behavior, you're kind of a whinger, kind of a whiner. But I'm going to say this. There are a lot of people who support the Lincoln Project voters out there who are watching. They're not just watching John Albers. They're watching the corporate firms that are donating to Georgian Republicans who are doing this. So folks at Coca-Cola, they're giving money to the Republican Party and Republican candidates in Georgia who are supporting these bills. Now, Coca-Cola has said all the right things about diversity and equality and civil rights and police reform and George Floyd and everything else, but their money tells a different story. Aflac, same thing. You say the right things about diversity and equality and civil rights, but your money tells a different story. Home Depot, same story. You talk about diversity in your work crew and in your workforce, and your money tells a different story. So if your money as a corporate enterprise is Delta Airlines, okay? Delta, me with a gajillion miles on your airline. Delta Airlines, they absolutely go over the top to talk about how they're committed to diversity and equality and inclusion. And yet their money is going to people who are trying to make sure that Delta's workforce and many of Delta's customers in Georgia will find it much more difficult to vote. So the corporate money behind these guys is what I really care about. John Albers is roadkill. But the rest of these people that are funding these operations, and that's a broader problem, Terry, that we can talk about more later. Right. Those folks who are funding the Republicans after they said, oh, no, we're not going to do this after the insurrection and the sedition. Well, they're all back. They're all back, in part because we've been off the battlefield a little bit, but we're back on the battlefield now. So Georgia Republicans were watching.
That's right. And, Rick, just so that other people know that this is not unique to Georgia. This is a playbook that they will be deploying to many, many states. There's a big story in the New York Times that outlines exactly what Republicans are going to do. And they are looking at wins in Arizona, Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, Texas. These are places that they lost, and some of them, where they control the state legislatures and they can influence changing laws there at a state level. Yep. And the Heritage Foundation, their super PAC, and ALEC, some of the Republican state organizations, they are all in cahoots to try to replicate certain bills with almost the exact same language in multiple state legislatures. So what you're seeing going on in Georgia, you probably wonder why we keep talking about Georgia. This is a template for what they're going to do across battleground states in preparation for 2022. And hear me when I tell you this. Republicans are very good at this. This is what they do. The Republican Party in the 90s, in the 80s, were masters at get out the vote and organization. It left Democrats in the dust. And since then, that's why you see Republicans control so many state houses. Because when Barack Obama was president, over 1,000 seats across the states locally went to Republicans. That there is no accident. Yep. State legislatures draw congressional lines. They are incredibly important. They set election law. These things are really important. We often focus on federal big issues and big cases, but it has never been more important than it is now for folks out there to pay attention to who their state representatives are and what they are doing in this space. Because you'll turn around in 2022 when it's time to vote and you go, what do you mean there's only one voting drop-off box in Harris County for 5 million voters? What do you mean where there's no more early voting? It'll happen under your nose, and by the time you notice, it'll be too late unless you start paying attention now. So that's why we continue to focus so much on this. That's why we take on these fights. And if you don't want to cry and whine on the House floor of your local state house, then pick the right side of democracy. Don't be a pro voter suppression bill supporter, and you won't have to worry about it. It's pretty simple. But speaking of one of those people, Mo Brooks, Congressman Mo Brooks from Alabama, he's back. Remember this guy? Okay, Mo Brooks. He was one of the Stop the Steal guys that was out there, very, very enthusiastic supporter of President Trump, and he's one of the first to question the integrity of the election out there with this bullshit voter fraud stuff. Well, he's now running for Senate. And in his Senate announcement, guess who he had by his side? Our favorite little brown shirt wannabe, Stephen Miller, was there for this
Santa Monica
announcement. Yes, good. I mean, even his own family can't stand this guy. Right. That's Stephen Miller, not Mo Brooks, but I don't know what the situation is with Mo. But he may be in some trouble too, given his role in the January 6th stuff. But in his announcement, he's actually wearing this Stop the Steal stuff with a badge of valor. I think we have a clip from his announcement video.
Mo Brooks has stood shoulder to shoulder with President Trump in the fight against the D.C. swamp and radical socialists who govern Congress.
Alabama Representative Mo Brooks has been leading the effort and says it's gaining momentum. He joins us live. Sir, thank you for being here.
Mo Brooks led the fight in Congress for honest and accurate elections, earning him the admiration and respect of patriots across America.
You know what's curiously absent from that is the whole we're going to go and kick some ass. Remember that when he at the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th before people went up there and went to go kick some ass and violently sacked our Capitol? Yeah, that's not in there. But
strange how that happens.
It's strange how that happens, right? That part that could kind of get you in trouble for inciting a freaking insurrection. No, we're not going to go that far. But he's very proud of his questioning the election. These people are absolutely terrible. And the fact that they're now wearing, like, this sedition is a selling point for them, tells you that they're anti-democratic. They are against our constitutional republic. And it tells you how far the Republican Party has actually fallen, that this is what they're using. Years ago, this would have been disqualifying, absolutely disqualifying. And if a Democrat had done something equivalent to this, Republicans would be screaming bloody murder. So he's not the only one. There's some others that are out there that are running on this Trump ticket, because it is now the Trump-looking party. It is not the Republican Party it's not your father's Republican Party, clearly. And as we see more and more, you don't believe me? Just look at all the people who are marching down to Mar-a-Lago, continuing to kiss the ring of Donald Trump. Why he still has this level of influence over the Republican Party after everything that's happened there will be plenty of volumes written on this. But getting his blessing is just something that I'll never understand. But it's the subject of a new movie that we'd like to show you the trailer of.
They thought I was down for the count. Disgrace, irrelevant. They said I was nothing but a bloated orange has-been, humiliating himself on the golf course, hiding like a rat in a Palm Beach tanning bed. They said I was broke, washed up. I was up against it with the feds and suffering from early stage dementia. They called me a loser, but who's the loser now? Every jamook and jabroni in Washington wants a piece of me. Here are the players. Kevin McCarthy, the DC drip with a caucus problem no pill could fix. Babyface Lindsey Graham, a real shitheel, but man, that guy can grovel for money, and he's a good earner too. Lauren Hot Barrel Boebert, she's got more guns and less books than Osama bin Laden. Matt the Head Gadsby, a forehead for days and nothing behind it. Little pork rind Mike Lee. Nobody licks boots like this wise guy, but don't give him a phone call because he'll pretend he never got it. And the cold-blooded Kristi Noem. She'd watch her own granny die of COVID if it would grease a few votes her way. They all lined up at Mar-a-Lago, begging and crawling on their fat little knees just to get a taste of my action. They're nothing without me, and they know it. The Don Father, Part 2. They came for my blessing. I gave them my curse. A Donko Pictures production.
Oh my goodness gracious. Shout out to the creative production team for putting that together. Oh my God. You want to know a little quick fact? So everyone knows that The Godfather Part 1 and 2, greatest movies ever made, right? My mom was in show business and she actually auditioned for a part in The Godfather. She didn't get it, but because the director thought she was really pretty and liked her, let her be an extra in like the wedding scene. And so she was filming with the greats. Yeah, with, Robert Duvall and Brando and those guys. And years later, I actually became friends with Robert Duvall through my work on Capitol Hill. And he's a Republican. He's a big supporter of law enforcement. And we became friends through that. And I've had dinner with him and his lovely wife. And it was really crazy when I told him how he actually gave my mom a ride home from the set of The Godfather 40 years ago, and because she lived on the way to his house, completely innocent, just being a nice guy, but Jimmy Kahn, who's in that movie, had the hots for my mom, except she was like 17. And so he would flirt with her all the time. My mom was completely uninterested. And one of the crew said, Jimmy, she's like 17. He was like, oh shit, I'm sorry, I didn't know. So Robert Duvall called Jimmy Kahn to bust his chops about this when we were at dinner at his house one time, and it was hysterical. He was like, holy shit. He goes, wait, what? He's like, I didn't know. Yeah. So anyway, little fun fact about my mom and The Godfather. So anyway.
I love that. That's a great story.
Yeah. My mom's got stories for days. She was on Broadway and she is really cool. My mom's awesome. Shout out to my mom. So you know who's not awesome? Sidney Powell. And you know what else is not awesome? Getting sued by Dominion for defamation. I don't know. Maybe if you run around saying that accusing of a company of being in cahoots with the Chinese and Venezuelans, and that there's a whole big plot and for election fraud with your voting machines, might land you in court. Well, Sidney Powell is now trying to claim, she's trying to claim that, well, it was just my opinion. No reasonable person would believe that they were true statements of fact. This is her defense now, Rick. We all saw Sidney Powell go out there how many times and make a jackass of herself, repeating these insane lies as a lawyer. She went to the White House. Remember the reports? And had these, that's when the screaming match allegedly happened, was her, Mike Flynn, the pillow guy, the Overstock CEO. And they had the notes, right? That one of the photographers saw the notes of Mike Lindell. Like we're supposed to believe now that she was just making it up. It's like the Alex Jones defense. Oh, it's just entertainment. Well,
it's the Tucker Carlson defense on Fox as well. You know, it's I'm an entertainer. It's the Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson defense. I'm just having fun. The people that are hearing those messages do not believe that is the case.
Absolutely not. January 6th. Hello. These people, why do you think they were there? They were ginned up by these bullshit lies. And it was amplified by all the multiple, right-wing echo chambers. We're going to talk about that in a minute with our guest. And this type of this is dangerous. Words matter, and they were given an audience by the president of the United States. This wasn't Giuliani was standing there. The president's consigliere. We're in a Godfather mode now. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. And now we're supposed to believe that she's just, oh, it was just my opinion. Get the hell out of here with that bullshit. But you know what was not
for
bullshit?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't even want to hear it. She's not. When Rudy Giuliani and the Trump team, it distances themselves from you, when you're too crazy for that crew, then there's something wrong, because that's what they did. They actually cut her loose. They're like, yeah, we're not.
If you're too goddamn
she's not
crazy
part of
for
our
Rudy
team.
World.
Right. Oh my gosh. Speaking of January 6th, just really quick, an update over the weekend. I don't know if you saw 60 Minutes, but the former U.S. attorney here in D.C., Sherwin, he went on 60 Minutes and gave a really compelling interview. And actually, we talked about this on the podcast. And it's fascinating. And if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. But he talks about how they're gathering information that could possibly lead to sedition charges. We haven't seen that in a long time in this country. And it's possible that some of those people could face those charges. And it's possible, he said, that President Trump could himself be charged with inciting this or having a role in it. Wouldn't that be something? I mean, he's already got 29 active cases, again, lawsuits currently right now. Donald Trump does. Let's add another one. I think let's add that to the list. Why not? Why not? But anyway, before we bring in our guest tonight, I think it's really important that we show our latest Lincoln Project ad about why we continue in this fight. Rick, I know you had something to do with this, but let's play it. We'll talk about it after, and then we'll bring in Dave Troy.
America is starting to breathe again. A decent man as president, a plan to protect us. It feels almost normal, but it's not. Republicans still will not admit that President Biden was legally elected, which means they don't believe in democracy. They believe an election is only legitimate if they win. That's not democracy. Their plan? Pass voter suppression bills to block minorities from voting, take back Congress, impeach President Biden. We refuse. We refuse to accept the end of the American experiment. We refuse to allow anti-democratic autocrats to steal our country. We choose to fight, and we will not lose. Join us.
Well done. Well done. Why this ad and why now?
It's important to remind folks that this fight goes on, and we're still in this fight. And we've been honest about it. We've been open about it. We've had a couple of miles of rough road, and people thought they took us out of this process. People thought that they were going to have an open field running so that Trump and Trumpism could return. And so that the forces that are opposed to American democracy and to our republic and want to replace it with something autocratic and dark, we're going to have an open field. Well, they're not. We're here. We're still in this fight every day. We're coming back stronger every day. And a lot of the things that we believe are vital fights were outlined in that spot. We are not going to stay quiet and be passive when these threats exist to this country. And we're not going to be quiet and passive in what 2022 will entail if we don't get back in this game.
That's
because
right.
2022 could potentially be a big year for Republicans in the House. They could take back the House. You could have Kevin McCarthy as Speaker again. You could have Mitch McConnell as Majority Leader again. Not even a question that those things could happen. And
that's right.
And God love our friends on the left, but we have a certain fighting spirit that we think is important in this process. And and that ad is one of the signals that we're back in the game.
Indeed. So this is why we fight. We hope that everyone continues to join us in it. And Donald Trump, I mean, he's going to have his new platform, right? He's creating his new Twitter with the pillow guy. Isn't that happening?
Sucker or whatever it's called. Who knows?
Oh boy! I can't wait to see what kind of nonsense that is. Good Lord, we haven't had a fire hose of fuckery in a while, and it may come from.
No, we have not. But I suspect that would be some weapons grade fuckery.
Oh my! Let's bring in tonight's guest. Dave Troy, welcome to The Breakdown.
Hey there, glad to be here.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give you a proper introduction to those folks who don't know you. Dave Troy, he's a network analyst, disinformation specialist, and the co-curator and host of TEDx Mid-Atlantic. A researcher, writer, entrepreneur, and speaker, he recently published a 6-part series that explains the big history behind January 6th. Going deep on what happened that day, why, and how we might keep it from happening again. We like that kind of history. We encourage everyone to go watch that. Dave, we're pleased to have you, partly because we want to talk about January 6th. This is an ongoing issue for us here, and who better than you? When you were making this series, Dave, what stood out to you as the most alarming aspect of what happened, what led up to that day? We already know what happened, but what led up to that day? What was the most alarming thing that you uncovered?
Yeah, so I think it's first important to preface this with the fact that, I've been studying disinformation and social media data and things for a long time, about 14 years for social media data broadly, and then for like the last 5 years specifically around disinformation campaigns. So I had been looking at a lot of stuff and was struggling to kind of make sense of the themes and connections that seem to be present in a lot of these campaigns. And having read a lot of history lately, and specifically collaborating with an author and historian named Ann Nelson, who wrote a book called Shadow Network about the Council for National Policy, that really started to put some pieces together for me, because what I was seeing was direct connects between what she was citing, and she did a terrific article on February 22nd about CNP's role. And then I started seeing other connections into other themes that we were seeing, and I was able to kind of synthesize everything together. So probably the weirdest thing that we picked up on was the fact that there's kind of this old grudge match around the gold standard and the New Deal going back to 1933, which, we all kind of know is part of U.S. history, and you kind of think about it or whatever, and like, okay, but it's hard to see that through line to today. And so when we started to kind of see the fit together, it really helped to explain some of the current propaganda that we're seeing, like in the worlds of QAnon, because what we were seeing there was stuff promoting ideas around the sovereign individual, and pushing things like cryptocurrency and gold. And it's like, well, what is the obsession here exactly? And it turns out it goes back to an entire line of philosophy, and there's actually one guy that kind of is the through line between all of it, and it's Lieutenant General or Major General Jack Singlaub, who was a CIA guy. He's 99 years old. He founded, like all these things related to right in the Reagan era. So he was part of founding the CNP, and he was part of founding the World Anti-Communist League. Sometime before that, he was part of the John Birch Society. And what we found that was crazy was that Michael Flynn actually received the Jack Singlaub Award in 2018 from the Schlafly folks, as well as the CNP. They were all kind of there together. And I'm like, holy hell, this is what this is about libertarianism, gold, anti-communist stuff. So that was kind of the big through line that we saw that came out of it.
That's wild. That is a cacophony of kooks that I don't think a lot of us realize. I admit that when I used to go to a lot of the conservative meetings and I was in a lot of the circles, and I used to go to CNP meetings, and not realizing what this really was. It was just kind of part of the, if you're in the in crowd of the conservative movement, CNP was just one of those kind of cool clubs to be in. It was exclusive.
Right, but it's the ideological current day heir of the John Birch Society, basically.
Yes, yes. And once I realized that, I was like, yeah, I won't be going to those meetings anymore. No. That's crazy.
Well, and there is a certain infrastructure of those things that as you point out, that informs the broader Republican Party and informs the conservative movement in ways that are very normative. They are very powerful, because when CNP changes its mind on something, all of a sudden, look, they've always been oriented more towards social, national security, sort of big philosophical issues. But when they were anti-spending, that was anathema. When Trump got into office and started spending money like a drunken sailor on a bench, they were like, okay, no problem. They let it go. So they have a certain degree of influence that I think is almost, it is largely unknown. I admire the work you've done in sort of peeling the layer back on that, Dave.
Well, certainly Anne is, really to be credited for putting it all together. And she worked with a researcher named Brent Allpress, who pulled together a lot of threads. But the fact that so many of the people that were involved in January 6th came out of that, CNP crowd is just really interesting. Kylie Kramer was the one. She's a CNP member. She's the daughter of Amy Kramer, who founded Tea Party Patriots. She was the one that took out the permit.
I know the Kramers.
Yeah, so she took out the permit for the ellipse on January 6th. Ali Alexander is a CNP member. He was leading the thing.
Yeah,
you've got Jack Posobiec in the mix. You've got Scott Pressler and Brandon Straka. They're all there. And I had been tracking all these people individually as problems for a long time. And then to see them all together, like in this grand Broadway finale, they're all in the final act.
Posobiec, a guy like Posobiec, who goes back to being one of the chief proponents in the beginning of Pizzagate, of Seth Rich. He's got all these profoundly deep ties to the alt-right.
And to Russia,
all these ties to American and European white supremacists. And so, and of course, Ali Alexander, or Ali Akbar, as he was when Tara and I first knew him, the guy is just the guy is definitionally skeezy and involved in all. He's always found in the worst part of the worst underbelly of the movement.
Yes,
at any given moment. So,
and in lockstep with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone? Did you pick up a lot of Stone links in this whole thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's not a lot that isn't like a degree from Roger Stone. I don't think that Roger Stone was personally, formally participating in CNP, but he's got all these critters that are very close to him. So
critters
Cassandra
is the right word.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh God, Cassandra Fairbanks.
Yeah, just don't get me started.
It's like I said, it's a cacophony of kooks, and it's just shocking to see when you peel the layers back how far down the rabbit hole this all goes into some really dangerous stuff. And it's and they've been aided and abetted by social media platforms. And you've talked about this a lot. The major social media companies, the Facebooks, Twitters, and stuff, they really missed a lot of this coming out of 2016. Either they missed it or they didn't want to know. But how did they fail so badly to kind of catch this, to be taken advantage of this way? Because they Stop the Steal and a lot of this stuff that's gone on, they wouldn't have been able to put it all together if it weren't for these social media platforms.
Absolutely. Well, from my perspective, it's kind of systemic. Facebook and Twitter both started with the idea of getting traction, of getting growth, of getting everybody online, and stickiness, high engagement, all of that. There was a very influential guy out of Stanford named BJ Fogg, still there. who does basically research on how to make products addictive. And so a lot of these products like Instagram and Facebook used that playbook to become really sticky. And nobody at the beginning of these platforms sat down and thought, what kind of society will we create if everybody's on these platforms, and they're sort of maximally addicted to them? What sort of world will that be? They were just concerned about user growth. And furthermore, when Twitter was starting up, they were routinely kind of not deleting fake accounts on the platform, kind of letting the numbers be inflated a little bit, because that would allow them to attract more investment, which in turn would allow for an IPO. And so there's this systemic bias towards sort of looking the other way instead of creating what amounts to a really high quality platform that actually makes society better. Nobody ever was measuring that, So, where we are now is that, they got kind of caught in the 2014, 2015, and then into 2016 timeframe with the whole Cambridge Analytica thing, where people realized like, hey, this seems really bad. You should close these holes. So they kind of quietly closed some loopholes that they thought nobody would notice. And then around 2018, about 3 years ago, people realized that just how bad things had gotten. And so that was when a lot of this was revealed really in full. But it should have been taken care of at the beginning. And they need to do something now, like put in place like a chief ethics officer and like a sociologist at a C level to figure out what the hell's going on, whether it's optimal, whether it's leading to radicalization, and how are they going to keep that from happening.
Well, if we're up to you, Rick Wilson, Rick thinks that Facebook should be completely razed and the earth should be salted over.
I think that's a good start. Yeah.
Yeah, because of how destructive it's been,
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's like the social dilemma, right? I mean, the social dilemma was something that Netflix documentary, holy shit, when we watched it, it was like, I mean, that really drives home how addictive, how destructive, how manipulative it is. The ability, even for people who would think that they're, educated and rather sophisticated people, even to your point that they were using these techniques that are manipulating people's behavior and the way that they consume information. It's incredibly alarming, I think. And that's why we want to continue to draw attention to it and why we bring experts like you on to talk about that. So what exact role did these social media sites play leading up to January 6th? And is it more than just Facebook and Twitter? I mean, Parlor was a thing. There's some other kind of, darker web weirdo things going on. Like, what are some of the examples of that people should be careful that they don't go down these rabbit holes?
Well, rabbit holes is a good way to describe it, because what generally happens is that people start being exposed to this kind of content on fairly mainstream platforms. So Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, what have you, things that normally people use on a regular basis. And they'll see something like, this seems like kind of an offbeat channel. I'll watch a video and they get suggested another channel. And as these algorithms keep sort of advancing, they tend to suggest further and further extreme content. And you kind of get to a point where you're maybe looking for content that doesn't exist on, say, a YouTube. And you'll find, if you do a Google on, say, a particular content creator that's referred to in some video you saw on YouTube, that you'll be directed to BitChute. Now, BitChute is a kind of YouTube clone that is centered around what I would say right-wing video content. So you will suddenly find yourself in this much more extreme rabbit hole that has all this other kind of content. So the milieu that people were in 2020 was this sort of situation of sort of what I would call like rated PG radicalizing content on Twitter and Facebook. But then you could quickly get into the R and the rated X stuff that was much more extreme and was talking about specific planning by going into Parlor, BitChute, Telegram, Signal, what have you. There's all these different places where people can be finding this stuff. So I think in general, that's kind of how it functioned. And what we found from studying Parlor, and I've probably watched something like 1,500 videos off of Parlor, which is not good for your brain.
Oh,
no, you have
God.
to take a break every little while.
Good God.
Reset
That's dedication.
yourself. Well, we were my research partner and I are working on a film project around this. So we kind of had to do it to suss out what was there. But, when you do that, you start to realize just kind of the scope of this problem and the way that people are being radicalized, the kind of content they're seeing, where their heads are at. And, you can kind of understand how this happened. It's not good and it's not justified, but you can start to understand what headspace they were in. And it's been fascinating to watch. So all these platforms play a role in bringing people to that point of radicalization.
Wow. Rick?
Wow. Let's go with some tweets. So we've got some questions out there in the Twitter world.
Awesome.
How does all the current disinformation connect to the Koch brothers, even to James Buchanan? That's Carolyn Reno.
And I happen to know that she doesn't mean James Buchanan, the president. She means an economist at George Mason University who was connected with the Kochs. And basically, sort of a complicated story there, but there's this libertarian, sort of philosophy that says that they want to accelerate the transition to a, like sovereign economy. So there's a book called The Sovereign Individual that came out in 1997 in the UK that outlines a lot of this. And it kind of predicts the rise of cryptocurrency and that sort of thing. So the basic idea is that, people in that camp believe that we really need to return to this kind of gold standard based view of the world, which in this case would be applied through cryptocurrency, through Bitcoin and that sort of thing, and that we can return to this realm of the sovereign individual. And the idea of the sovereign individual is that there's no meddling from governments, from banks, because libertarians don't like governments, they don't like banks, they don't like central bankers. And there's a lot of actual baked in anti-Semitism in all of that as well, because a lot of times the role of the central bank is, depicted through Rothschilds and various other, kind of Jewish stereotypes. So, that's kind of what's at the core of this. It's fundamentally a kind of neo-reactionary, libertarian, gold standard kind of currency based view of the world. And basically somebody like Buchanan and arguably his successor at George Mason is Tyler Cowen.
At the Mercatus Center at George Mason?
Possibly, yeah. But I'm thinking about Tyler Cowen, who's taken on his seat. And, the idea is that people aren't going to really like hearing this news. Like, they don't really want to hear they have to go down this path, but there's this paternalistic idea that the Kochs have, Charles has, since David is dead. But, the idea that paternalistically, we need to introduce people to this set of ideas. It's literally giving them some medicine that they don't want, but that's for their own good. Now, that sounds really creepy when you kind of put it that way. Like, I don't know if I want your medicine, please, doctor. Let's at least talk about it first. But that's kind of the way that it's been framed. And there's a book that came out a couple of years ago called Democracy in Chains by Nancy MacLean that talks about this set of ideas further. And so there's a little bit of deception that's involved in this, and it's justified as it'll all be so much better in the end because we won't have all of these problems that come from central banks and governments. It's like, sounds kind of like 1880 to me, but okay.
Yes, no kidding.
Little Dickensian,
Wow. A lot of people, the Koch brothers thing we could dedicate a whole show to that.
Oh yeah.
But what I want to ask you about a tweet that you put out recently. You said, "We don't live in a post-truth era. We live in a world awash in influence campaigns. We need to shift our focus from fighting disinformation to understanding and limiting influence and state capture." What did you mean by that? That was interesting.
Yeah. So first, I wanted to credit my friend Steve Hassan, from whom I stole the idea of not living in a post, truth era, because he studies cults and whatnot, and he really believes. Yeah, he's great, and he really, I think, understands well this idea of a world that is being, kind of manipulated fully by influence campaigns. And we've gotten to the point now where really anybody can kind of be their own personal cult leader. I mean, you go on Clubhouse, Lord help us, but that's just like a disinformation breeding ground waiting to happen. But at any rate, we have gotten to the point where we see that truth is seen as subjective. And so we conclude from that, oh, it must be a post-truth era. Well, I don't think that's the case. I think there is such a thing as truth and fact and science and, empirical evidence and all of that. But when you live in a world where, there's so much influence that's, dividing people into tribes and small groups and what have you, everybody's got their own personal view of the world that they're pretty, wedded to. And so we've described it that way. So I think that we need to think about the potential for these influence technologies. And it is just a technology. And I don't mean bits and bytes. I'm talking about the social nature of influence. Like, that's a technology. It's a political technology.
Yes.
And when you've got, that kind of thing happening, it's really easy to get to a point where, something like an American democracy is the puppet of very influential people with good influence technology. And so at what point do we live in a democracy that's run in a feudal way? At what point is it a plutocracy? And I think that's what we really need to guard against, is like slipping into feudalism. There's, a lot of discussion recently. I just did another tweet a few minutes ago, actually, about neo-feudalism. And I think that that's a terrific way to think about this, because if we don't actually have a real democracy, that's basically what we have, is feudalism. So,
well, that's the argument that Stu Stevens would make. That's the argument that Stu Stevens would make. He often talks about, what the Republican Party is now advocating and standing for is not a democracy. What they have allowed, what they allowed under Donald Trump for 4 years, that's not a democracy. And I don't know that people really are ingesting that and then like processing it. That's why we talk about this all the time. I don't think they get it. Right, yeah, because it was done in such a normal, the normalcy of the way the information came out, the way it became coming from the White House. I mean, Donald Trump, Jeb Bush of all people, warned us that Trump would be a chaos candidate, which meant he'd be a chaos president, and not realizing the type of chaos system that he used. He was a master at this with information, and normalized that. And look at the result, culminating in January 6th. It's extraordinary.
Absolutely.
Rick, we called up another tweet, right? Let's do one more.
Yeah. How are we as ordinary people ever going to overcome the problem of disinformation outlets being funded by the wealthy donor class? Well, that's a good question, Dave. How do we address that?
I mean, I think the first thing we need to do is to become more broadly aware of the nature of the problem. And we need to start to, get institutions like Congress more aware of how this stuff works, more able to kind of intervene and look at what's actually happening. I've been really pleased to see that Carolyn Maloney of the House Oversight Committee is looking deeply into Parlor and its funding. There was just news today on Parlor's funding that it was actually funded in part by a company out of Shanghai, which we still don't have any real information on, but that's pretty fascinating. It's called Dream Seekers Limited. Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking that's the Falun Gong channel into it. And so, we need Congress to be very engaged in understanding this stuff. And I think that would be a good first start.
There's a Russian connection to Parlor too, isn't there? Weren't they hosting some servers when Parlor went down in Russia?
Yeah, it's been sort of off and on with Russia and them. We still don't know if Russia's involved in the financing in some way. But they basically were using some hosting sites that were linked to the Russian state government for a bit. Right now, they're using a weird hosting company out of Southern California that seems to be being run by conservative Armenians with like no real other business going on. That's very strange. Called Sky Silk. Still need to figure that out. But that's the thing, is like there's so many questions here about how this works. And we just need to get this stuff more exposed to, congressional oversight so that the public can get a sense of what's going on too.
Unbelievable. Not to mention that like the co-founder of Parlor married some like Russian honeypot he met in Vegas and like married her after 6 months. And like they got married in Russia. They went back and right. And the mother
he
was
lived
like
in Vegas at the time, so
Yes, but she didn't.
It happens. No, she did not. She was traveling the United States. I was the one that exposed that bit of info, and we still don't totally know what it means. But yeah, she was traveling the U.S. and met him, and then got married, and it's a strange story.
Yes, and the wife's
Song as old
mother
as
is like
time.
some kind of like Russian government official. Like it's
Yeah, her
just
mother
very
works for the Russian
unsavory.
government. Yeah.
Yeah,
Of
it's all
course.
very creepy.
Mhm.
Things that
I
make
mean,
you
it's a
go,
free country, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. Very interesting nonetheless.
Hmm.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining us. You mentioned
Anytime.
Clubhouse.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any
Really appreciate your insights.
are there any other sites that people should be wary of? Because Clubhouse didn't start out as a breeding ground for disinformation. It was supposed to be exclusive and invite only, and
Yeah,
it
it's
has
exclusive
turned into
disinformation at the start.
yeah, it's really ballooned into something I don't think that they ever intended it to be now. But besides Clubhouse, are there any other platforms or sites that our supporters and viewers should be warned about? They could get sucked in.
Keep an eye out for Panquake. I know it sounds stupid, and it is kind of stupid name, but the same people that were behind a lot of bad disinfo ops are behind that. So I would keep an eye out for that. Also, whatever Trump thinks he's doing could be very dangerous. It's possible that whatever Trump thinks he's doing could actually be this Panquake thing. So these are emerging threats. We will see. But the thing with Panquake is that it's fully distributed. There's no like single database that you can like moderate and turn off. So if it gets traction, then it could be impossible to shut down. So.
Oh my. Well, thank you for that bit of information. We'll be on the lookout for that.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Let's talk about that when it happens,
Yes. Well, we'll definitely have you back, Dave. We appreciate you. Be sure to check out Dave's 6-part series. You've on the Capitol riot. You can go to davetroy.medium.com. It's all there. And I encourage folks to watch it because you'll be smarter for it and more informed. Dave Troy, thank you so much for your work.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
And make sure you follow him on Twitter.
Thanks, brother.
Oh my gosh, Rick, I didn't even know that did you know about this Panquake or whatever the hell it's called? I mean, it's like an endless.
I never even heard of it before. I looked that up just now and I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, here we go, more.
Just when you thought. It's like a horror movie where the villain never dies. Just when you thought we got rid of Trump.
These people are like the
Twitter
herpes of disinformation.
I feel like a rapid response video might come out of that.
Yes.
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, tonight's call to action is it's in line with what we've been talking about. We've been going after some of these corporate money PACs that are funding the seditionists. Recently, we went after AT&T. They said no, we're not going to give money to anyone that was involved in the January 6th, trying to stop the election and all that. Well, guess what? They went back on that and they started giving money to members of Congress because, it's about the totality of their votes. We're not going to just hold them accountable for that one vote that was trying to delegitimize Joe Biden's presidency. That's BS, and we're calling it BS. So AT&T, what are you guys doing? Lincoln Project, we put out a call to action there. Folks, if you're an AT&T customer, they're a pretty big conglomerate. They own CNN. They own a lot of other big things. Let them know how you feel, that you're not okay with them continuing to fund seditionists. They are not the only ones. We are also bringing attention in Georgia to the voter suppression issue. That's the other one that we are very passionate about. Rick brought this up earlier. Coca-Cola, Delta, Aflac, these Home Depot. Guys, you're not taking really tough stances. You're kind of giving these, milquetoast, lukewarm statements that, we're for voting rights. But in the meantime, there's still people that their PACs are supporting that are introducing awful, awful bills in Georgia that are that would make it more difficult for people to vote. That's not okay. As a matter of fact, tomorrow there is a rally. There's a protest in Atlanta happening at Delta, where people will be able to make their voices heard. That's the so if you're in the Atlanta area, there's the information. Feel free to join that protest. We don't have anything to do with that. Those are good civil rights folks down there, but we think it's important to draw attention to what's going on if you want to participate, because it's important, and that's democracy. Peacefully protest. Anything else that you wanted to add?
One more thing before we close. Folks, a lot of people have been asking us where the gear store went. Well, the gear store is back at gear.lincolnproject.us. All of the things are back there, and there'll be some new things coming soon. Shirts, hats, mugs, all the
Did we lose Rick right as he was? We lost Rick, but that's okay. I'll pick up where Rick left off. If you like the Lincoln Project gear, the hats, the sweatshirts, the zip-ups, they're all there, and there's new stuff coming. So be sure to check that out. And also for folks who are wondering some of the work that we've been doing, I'm also the Transition Advisory Committee chair. And we've been working on compiling a stewardship report of the Lincoln Project, of the effectiveness, how are the donations, how your hard-earned money and donations to us were spent. So that is out. If you would like to see our financial stewardship report, it is on our website. You're welcome to take a look at it because we want you to see we were good stewards of your money. So be sure to check that out. That's on our website also. And we're very proud of that. Myself, Fred Wellman, and Dr. Lara Brown, we oversaw the compilation of this report, and it was a collective effort. So check it out. It's on the website. And don't forget to sign up for Honestly Abe, our newsletter that has our information on what's going on and highlights of things. It has new ads, all that. So if you're not subscribed to Honestly Abe, check it out. Become a member of that. It's free, and we like that. And as always, check out our sister show, We're Speaking. They'll be on tomorrow night talking about the Violence Against Women's Act. They'll also have Representative Sheila Jackson Lee joining them. Congressman Jackson Lee is always a hoot from Texas. So she'll be on with the ladies, with Lisa and Maya tomorrow, as well as Kristen Speller. She's a domestic violence activist and founder of From Here to There LA. So they'll be talking all about that. And follow us at LPTV. We'll be back on Thursday, same time, same channel. And if you want to hear more, if you miss Rick and I in between now and Thursday, you can listen to us on the podcast. Rick and I are on the podcast with Reed Galen this week, and we're talking more about January 6th and some of the information that's been uncovered there, and the fact that Republicans are dragging their feet on a commission, shocker, and some more stuff. So check us out. Here's a clip from that podcast, and we'll see you on Thursday. Have a good night.
There are a lot of Republicans who do not understand the depth to which they have been compromised by not only their vote to overturn the election and to disenfranchise tens of millions of African Americans, but also by their clear alliance with the people who were kicking those doors down and beating those cops on the 6th. It's going to have a political repercussion where it's going to be harder for Republicans to go into a town hall Zoom, as we do in this day and age, and nod and wink and go, well, I'm not one of those Republicans. Well, if you're one of the 147, you are.
TPAC,
the party of President Trump.
Well, Donald J. Trump ain't going anywhere.
You know, they kept saying, he's going to start a brand new party. We have the Republican Party. It's going to unite and be stronger than ever before.
President Trump has sent a cease and desist order to the RNC, the NRCC, and the NRSC.
This is what he wrote tonight. Send your donation to Save America PAC at DonaldJTrump.com.
Do you miss me yet? Do you miss me? When it comes to great steaks, I've just raised the stakes. The Sharper Image is one of my favorite stores with fantastic products of all kinds. That's why I'm thrilled they agree with me. Trump steaks are the world's greatest steaks, and I mean that in every sense of the word. And the Sharper Image is the only store where you can buy them. Trump steaks are by far the best tasting, most flavorful beef you've ever had, truly in a league of their own. Trump steaks are 5-star gourmet, quality that belong in a very, very select category of restaurant, and are certified Angus Beef Prime. There's nothing better than that. Of all of the beef produced in America, less than 1% qualifies for that category. It's the best of the best. Until now, you could only enjoy steaks of this quality in one of my resort restaurants or America's finest steakhouses, but now that's changed. Today, through the Sharper Image, you can enjoy the world's greatest steaks in your own home with family, friends, anytime. Trump steaks are aged to perfection to provide the ultimate in tenderness and flavor. If you like your steak, you'll absolutely love Trump steaks. Treat yourself to the very, very best life has to offer. And as a gift, Trump steaks are the best you can give. One bite and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And believe me, I understand steaks. It's my favorite food, and these are the best.
Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Just watching my algorithms get crushed. I guess I did something to piss off the Instagram gods, so hopefully you're seeing this stuff anyway. We'll do what we can. Talk to you soon.